You know, but actually we'll do motivation afterwards. But what I wanted to start today with is a little bit of a better description of 9-round breathing. And Paula, you may already be very familiar with that. But the last time I sort of rushed through because I just wanted to give a taste of it. And I thought without having a little explanation beforehand, it might be challenging. So you may and hopefully have kind of looked at the handouts, but I just wanted to kind of chat a little bit on what that visualization is before we go into doing it. So this is one of those stabilizing meditations focused on the breath and has, as I mentioned before, there's background in FPMT where Lama Yeshe encouraged people to do this. Really great for getting your mind settled and in neutral. And then also can function as a purification sort of meditation as well. And I think I touched on that a little bit last week. But basically, I wanted to make sure that you have that inner body visualization kind of down. So the central channel, which I mentioned, is blue in color. They are, think of them as, actually you can think of them as almost being made of light, pliable, shining, blue, about the width of a straw, very flexible. And that channel starts where people say that the third eye is, that point sort of on your forehead between your eyebrows. About an inch in is where it starts. And then it curves along, sort of you can think of it as being in front of your spine, but aligned with your spine. And then that goes down, it actually goes farther, but imagining for the purpose of this meditation, about 4 finger lengths down from your navel, like if you're holding your hand like this. So you've got that blue tube of light, bright blue tube of light. And then on the right side, you've got a red channel. So same thing, think of it as being the width of a straw, made of light, is very nice. And this starts on the right, like your nostril on the right side, and kind of like an umbrella, the same thing, it goes up and down above, your crown, and then again along the right side of that blue channel. And for the purpose of this meditation, we're going to visualize that all 3 of the channels are joined at that bottom. And then I think I had mentioned to you that they say, and we've talked very briefly about just the connection between breath and mind, mental affliction, just the state of your thoughts and mind. So they say on the right side is like that would be things like aversion. They would say maybe, anger, those kinds of thoughts tend to run through that red channel. And then on the left side is same thing, starting from the nostril and then going up, curving along the front of your spine, coming down. That's a white shining channel. And when under the influence of mental affliction, like thoughts of attachment, greed, those kinds of things run along that channel, along with your breath. And so for this meditation, we're visualizing that they are joined at the bottom, all 3. And then last time, so you'll see 2 different things, and you can play with it and figure out what's most comfortable for you. But you can place your, and the instructions for the handout say your index finger on one or the other nostril to start with. But you can also, and you may see where people are doing this kind of like ring finger and thumb, because sometimes that's just a little bit easier to just kind of go back and forth. So you can play with what works better for you. But the key here when we're doing the meditation is, and you can visualize light coming in, imagining that it's purifying that channel. So you can imagine like white light coming in if you want or not, but either way, when the breath comes in, you can think of it as like flushing out the negativity, right? So that's what we're doing in this meditation, is we're bringing in, yes.
I've decided it would be smart to take notes. So Can you remind me what the blue in the center relates to? Like the red
So
relates to anger, aversion, the other one attachment, and greed.
yeah, so I will tell you truthfully, I've never heard anyone say that it's ignorance, but when for a Buddha, what happens is, and I don't want to get too far down this road, but eventually those two side channels actually collapse into that central channel, and it is just clear flowing through the central channel. So when you hear about chakras, one way to think of it is a place where things are knotted up. So our clear mind, our clear thinking, all of our really positive thoughts are kind of choked up at those points. So that's probably more information than you want. But when things are going well, it's through that central channel. And that's ultimately, there are some of those more esoteric practices, and that's exactly what you're trying to accomplish, is the dissolution of those side channels into this central channel where everything is just flowing very clearly. So that might be, yes.
This is completely out of left field. I have a massive painting. The channels are not identical. Can I show it?
Oh, please.
Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely.
I need 1 second. It's in that room.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
Sorry, we distracted you after you were like, we're going to jump in and do it.
No, it's good. It's good. I just realized, oh, wow.
Wow.
So I see blue. It looks like it's blue in the center and red on the right and white on the left. That looks correct. So what is it that you think isn't exactly? Are you there?
I am here. I'm just holding it. Shall I put it away and just get back to being like normal?
No, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. But yes, you can sit next to it or you can put it away. But yeah, that's amazing. But it does look like it has the red, the white, and the blue in the right place.
So there you go.
And then you can imagine, like where in those chakra areas where things are kind of wrapping around each other and those knots, right? And so, sometimes those are thought of as like these warm, fuzzy, great places. And the reality is the chakra part is not really ideal. What we want is unknotting those, like the releasing of those. Does that make sense? So that things flow perfectly through the central channel. So having said that, so that's, and thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful, really beautiful. And then, I'm sure you'll do other practices where you'll learn more of those inner body practices, but this is super helpful. And so, you can just imagine the light coming in. You can imagine all of the defilements, any kind of uptightness, any kind of self-centeredness, any negative emotion at all, just being purged, that. And I think kind of like a flushing action, right, is what we're visualizing. So having said that, what I'd like to do is just take a moment to kind of set our own personal motivation. The practical, wonderful reasons we're here, and then the highest reasons that we're here. I always say it. Maybe it's not such a secret wish. Maybe it is a very top of mind wish to benefit all beings. But let's get in touch with that reason for being here and doing this practice. And then when you're ready, you can decide how you want to close your right nostril. And then breathe in. Breathing in from your left nostril, light. Pausing, breathing out from your right, black smoke, defilement. Then breathing in again on your left. Breathing in white light, blessings and positivity. Then out on your right. Breathing out every anxiety, fear, negativity. And then one more time, breathing in. White light, purity and blessing. And breathing out every negativity. And now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to breathe in on the right. White light and blessings. Breathing out on the left. Black smoke and negativity. Breathing out on the right. In on the right. White light. Out on the left. Black smoke and negativity. In on the right. White light, blessings. Out on the left. Black smoke, clearing out all obstacles. And one last time. In on the right, white light. Out on the left, breathing out all negativity. And now, through both nostrils, breathing in. And then flushing out that central channel, breathing out through the central channel, imagining that breath coming out from that place in your forehead, between your eyebrows. Breathing in, both nostrils, breathing out, imagining you're clearing out all negativity. Breathing in, and one last breath out. Every bit of negativity, all obscurations, totally gone. And now here we are. Our minds like sky or ocean. Let's sit and try to stay in the awareness of that vast, pure clarity, the spaciousness of mind. Not being the observer or the observed, but just trying to experience that pure clarity and awareness. Thoughts, if they come, like clouds or fish, they're just passing through. Don't follow them, just be aware. Feel the spaciousness. Like the ocean, we're not the waves, the thoughts that can carry us away. We're something bigger. We're experiencing that spaciousness. That clear light nature of mind. Relaxed. The mind is not the thoughts, it's not the fish or the clouds. It's this space, this wide openness, raw awareness. If you get caught on a thought, just let it go. Return to the mind, return to the ocean or sky. Limitless and pure, so incredibly vast. And now when you're ready, you can come back into the room. So how was that? How did that feel?
It was good. I actually had a really easy time this time. I don't quite remember how distracted I got last time, but I do remember having some distractive thoughts. I was surprised that the sky called to me more than the ocean, because I ideally live in my mind on like a beach somewhere. But the sky just felt so freeing. And I struggled at first because clouds don't move as fast as fish. So I was like, crap, this thought's going to be here a while. But so then I just tried to like imagine myself like floating in the sky and maybe curving around them, or maybe they're like just rolling through. And my body wasn't as physically distracting this time either. I'm sitting on the floor again on my yoga mat, but I've also got I'm against my couch as a bit of a back brace.
Oh, that's so great.
I
Good.
I couldn't remember what the ideal hand position was. Not that I'm trying to be an
So-
expert. I remember it was something about like the
No, it's
stomach.
good. Left hand on the bottom, right hand on the top, and then kind of like a little bit like a teardrop,
Uh-huh.
and rested so that your thumbs are about even with your navel, but not, not tight, just relaxed.
Okay.
So you don't want your arms too close to your body, a little bit of space in between. Sorry, you can't really see me, but
Okay.
but as I said, most important thing is really your spine. And then, you can play a little bit with your hands and things. It's, the analogy of sky, both analogies are wonderful, and actually they are subtly different. But I think both give just this idea that, we tend to think, certainly before I ever had any teachings otherwise, I made the connection that my thoughts were my mind. And you really have to kind of step back to get that experience of, and I am reticent to use the word container, because a container sounds like there's boundaries and it's fixed, right? And that's why sky is such a great analogy, because it seems limitless for us, right? So that idea that is what mind is. It's not the discursive thoughts that are just floating through, whether they're moving quickly or slowly, and not the waves. The analogy of the ocean is really nice, though. So in a minute, it actually is really good, because I wanted to talk a little bit about distractions and the things, well, the obstacles to meditation. So, it would be distraction, or it would be dullness. And you'll start to get a sense that there is a subtly different feeling. Like when you're thinking sky, that's vast. And so if you're feeling dull, if you're feeling tired, then thinking of sky, maybe going with that meditation helps to kind of brighten your mind a little bit, open it up, because you want to be open, because you're closing down when you're feeling dull or drowsy. Conversely, if you're really, really scattered, if you're having a lot of distraction, then bringing it in, like water, the ocean, it's like, it's heavier, it's more grounding, for lack of a better word. So, you can play with those depending on what's happening in your mind. But, I was so happy to hear you say, because that was one of the things I was going to talk about, when you're distracted by physical pain, checking your posture, checking your seat. That's one of the first things that you want to do. And then, making sure that you're comfortable and doing what you need to do in that regard. And then I already kind of shared a little bit about, and there's a bunch of tips in the handout on, how to deal with the distracted mind, right? So, these breath meditations are really great for like bringing it in, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to focus and concentrate. So distractions are all, scattering. So you're trying to bring that attention, bring that focus in. So bringing it into the breath. One of the examples is, if you're visualizing, like say you're visualizing a Buddha, then, maybe visualizing them, we say they're made of light, and usually that's how you're visualizing them, but it might be helpful to, visualize them as being heavy. If you're meditating again on an object, maybe visualizing it as being smaller, that can help. All of these things are drawing the attention in. And just generally, you might find, if you're doing a stabilization meditation and you're thinking, should I go sky or ocean? If you're more distracted, then maybe, try the ocean. And then if you're more kind of tired and not holding interest, then you might want to think about focusing on the sky, right? Because it opens it up. So not just this meditation, but any observations or Anything coming up in terms of whether it's, distractions or other things when you're doing meditation for either of you?
Well, I feel like this is a relevant, and I won't say it's meditation, but what I found is I struggle from insomnia. I have a really hard time falling asleep at night because even if I'm like dead tired, the second I hit the bed, my mind's like boom, 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 boom. And so what I've tricked myself into doing is very similar, actually, is I just see like the light refractions and stuff that pop up, what I consider like in my eyelids or in my field. And when I'm able to just acknowledge, like, oh, I see a square, a sky, da, 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 I'm so focused on these random shapes and lines that my thoughts kind of dissipate and I'm able to fall asleep.
Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, it's interesting because I have to, anyways, I felt like that was somewhat relevant. And that's something I just kind of made up on my own one day because I was like, I've got to focus on something, and because my thoughts are going crazy. But similar, just like acknowledging, they're not thoughts, they're like shapes and lines, but acknowledging and letting it go, acknowledging and letting it go. And then if one goes on a tangent, I'm like, crap, I'm thinking again. So
Yeah. I used to, I had a teacher who said, because most of us feel like I can't meditate, I'm not a good meditator. And, they just said, actually, we can do very perfect meditations, but often on things we should not be meditating on, like, the example of a perfect meditation on anger, right? Like somebody does something that annoys you, and then all of a sudden you can perfectly recall every other thing that they've done and be absolutely focused on that. And, hang on to it, you can hold the object quite well, right? It's trying to develop habits of meditating and focusing on objects that are going to be beneficial, right? That's the part, we don't have the appetite for that quite yet, right? So, I think they say if you're feeling really distracted, sometimes it can be helpful to think about like a heavier topic. And by this, I mean, thinking about death and impermanence, which, Buddhists are great for bringing that up, right? Not to be depressive, but to make it very clear. Oh, I sound like a robot.
mm-hmm.
I sound like a robot to you too, Daniela?
Yes, very robotic. I have to run to the restroom while you figure out the robot thing, if that's okay. I apologize.
I have no idea what.
Sound normal again now. I'm not sure what it was.
I have to run to the bathroom. It's gone. It's back to normal, Bonnie.
Forgive me. I'm at a loss.
Me too. Just ignore it.
Yeah. Well, apologies for that. Apologies.
I have to apologize. I'm on the high street. I get a lot of traffic. So please excuse me. What was your question? What is it that Daniela's answering?
What was
your question?
Oh, my question was about how the meditations have been generally, and then what kind of things are coming up, whether it's distraction or dullness or, what's coming up for us as we're doing our meditation.
Thank you.
So we should probably wait till Daniela gets back. We're so small. But is there anything that's kind of coming up for you, or that you're struggling with, or that you're very happy with, or anything that you're noticing?
Well, I think that what many people may be doing is actually training the mind to to multitask. And anybody who has, to earn a living, you have to be thinking about the next thing and the next thing. So your mind becomes very, very efficient at doing that. And so when I sit, I have to then switch all that off. And, I've been training it to be very good at doing that. So that's a difficulty. But I am, with your voice and the atmosphere and the whole thing, the environment, I am able to settle and relax very, very quickly. Yeah.
Yes, Daniela.
I also noticed, I just thought of that when Mom Paula was talking last time compared to this time, although again, I was having some weird pain from my posture or how I was sitting, whatever. But I noticed this time too, it felt like I was able to be present with it longer. Last time I remember I was like, and maybe it was because of the pain that I was like, okay, it's probably almost over. All right, it's almost gone or whatever, like we're going to be done soon. And not in any insulting way. I think it was just helpful to practice it again and be able to be, first of all, in a more comfortable position, but also just having practiced it before, like, strengthening a muscle.
That and that is exactly what we're trying to do. In it, both of you said training the mind, strengthening the muscle. That's what we're trying to do. Familiarize ourselves with these things so that they are second nature. It's very, and the meditation we'll do today is exactly about that. But it's interesting, Paula, because I think there is a very real sense that when we're multitasking, that we're efficient. But I think, when you look at, and I would say certainly any of my teachers, when I watch them, my mind is always jumping ahead to the next thing. If you, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, or I think, people who have attained some level of realization, they're very present and very in the moment. And very effective and efficient and all of that. I think in some way it's like it is a grand illusion that we are being more effective when we're kind of scattering ourselves. And I'm as guilty of it as you. I mean, I'm juggling many, many, many things, and sometimes I'm just not present for any of them. And that's a challenge, and it creates a habit. So I think that's another point that you made, is we're training our minds to do that. And here we're kind of undoing that training and trying to train ourselves to be present and aware of the mind itself, because we can feel so constricted and trapped and contained in negative thoughts. And even some of the some of the things that seem like positive thoughts, but aren't really anything that's fruitful for us, right? So one of the things I started to kind of share was ways of, and it's they're antidotes to some of the obstacles to meditation. So feeling distracted or, bringing to mind just the brevity of this life and that the impermanence of things, that's kind of a heavy thought, but that can really help to kind of settle, like there's a reason I'm here trying to do this meditation practice. And just remembering that I don't have an infinite amount of time to do that, to do the things that are important in my life. So it helps motivate to settle the mind. And then conversely, if we're feeling, sometimes you can feel that, dullness or drowsiness, or quite frankly, depression, feeling low. And then thinking about something that's joyful and uplifting, the good fortune that we've had, the opportunity that we have in front of us to start to practice. Those things can help to counteract when our minds start sinking into some kind of dullness. The meditations that we've done, but up to now, have really been about stabilizing the mind. So they've been stabilizing meditations, where we're focusing on objects like our breath or our mind, and that kind of creates a platform of stability. And then there's analytical meditations, which that's one of the things we're going to be doing today, is an analytical meditation. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So objects of meditation for stabilizing meditation might be like your breath or the nature of mind. Analytical meditations are, and in all of these cases, we're trying to familiarize and train our mind with something. But here we're using that intellect and trying to focus on something that is positive, that's going to be beneficial to our mind. So objects of meditation could be, qualities that we want to develop, like patience or compassion. That could be an analytical meditation, right? What are all of the benefits of being patient? What are the benefits of having compassion? What are the benefits to myself? What are the benefits to others? And that's a kind of analytical meditation. As I said, thinking of death and impermanence, is it true? Is it true that all things are impermanent? We know this intellectually, but experientially in our lives, we behave like we have all the time in the world. And then we really are not so aware. It's sort of like the nature of mind. Like we tend to think that we are the thoughts or the clouds, like that's what our mind is. And we lose sight of mind. It's like focusing on the clouds or the fish and then losing the ocean or losing the sky. So we get lost in that. And likewise with something like impermanence that we know intellectually, this is true. But in our experience, we're experiencing things as if they are fixed and concrete, as if they're always going to be here. So stepping back and kind of tapping back into kind of the reality of the situation is super helpful for a whole range of things. So, I wanted to chat a little bit about what some of the negative afflictions are, and and why they're negative, and then what we can kind of do about them. And then that will really lead into our first analytical meditation. So we have in Buddhism, we say there's 3 or 5. I love Buddhism because everything can be broken down into more detail, and it's actually a greater understanding of unpeeling the onion. So we say, the main mental afflictions that we have are ignorance. So that is the main one. It's the most pervasive one. It's the hardest one to tackle. It's the cause of all of the things that we do, misunderstanding our world, and it causes all of our suffering. So that ignorance is defined in Buddhism as you could say very simply, not understanding how things are. So, for example, not understanding that things are impermanent, not really understanding that, not realizing that. In more advanced classes, you probably have already heard this idea of emptiness, but it's just an idea that all of the things in our world that seem so objectively true are not objectively true. I mean, that's basically what that means. And because we believe the false truth of things, the deceptive truth, we engage in other negative things. So out of that one poison, out of ignorance, just simply not understanding our world, we have 2 other mental afflictions. The next one is attachment. So I misunderstand the world, and I don't understand my role in the world, and I don't understand the effect of my actions on myself or others. So out of that comes this idea of attachment, kind of selfishness. So often attachment is like kind of misunderstood. I think especially Tibetan Buddhism, it's very joyful. And so enjoyment, liking things is not in itself a problem. The problem is thinking that it's going to continue, being willing to do something negative or grasping at it to try to get it to continue. Those are the problems. But, if you look at, I would say, again, looking at my teachers, they're incredibly joyful. So there's not a problem with enjoying things or liking things, but it's the liking of those things out of ignorance and with ignorance. So what does that mean? If I want to be, say, for example, and this is getting a little bit into karma, and I won't go too far down that road, but sometimes it might appear that doing something negative is going to give you something good, right? So if I'm stealing, for example, I want something, I steal it. It looks like now I have something good. From a Buddhist perspective, we would say, well, the fact that you have something good now must have come from some previous act of generosity. And the negative thing that you just did is actually going to cause you in the future to lose something. And more than that, it also develops a habit of stealing, right? So we talked in first class about this spiral that we call samsara, like the spiral of suffering, and how we can undo that. And starting to undo that is attacking these mental afflictions that are coming out of our ignorance. So attachment is also pretty pervasive, but we can address it. But we still see I as being important. There's so many Buddhist practices. If you've ever done exchanging self and others, or Tonglen meditations, there's all of these meditations to start to unlock that kind of self-cherishing mind that's behind that attachment. So out of ignorance, we have self-cherishing mind. Out of self-cherishing mind, then we have aversion. So often they say aversion or anger, which is, you would say, would be kind of like the opposite of attachment, or the opposite of, patience, not attachment. Anger is the opposite of patience. So you can see how out of misunderstanding the world, now I'm becoming self-cherishing, and now I'm angry, like other beings, their self is interfering with myself. Their self-cherishing, or their selfness, their existence is interfering with me. So I start, disliking things and having anger. And we have to talk about that. And that, like, being your own therapist is a great opportunity to talk about things like that. What does it mean to be patient and to try to rid yourself of anger? Because we're so conditioned that it can be a positive response. And we would say you can act without anger in a way that, if something is wrong, then you can take an action. You could even punish someone, but you don't have to have anger in your heart at the same time. And I think this is where it's, I was about to say, to be a parent is helpful, but, to be a parent of a fur baby is also helpful, right? You don't want them to get hurt. There's things you don't want them to do. You're not angry at them, right? But you do things like to stop them from doing something that's going to harm them, right? They might want to eat chocolate, and like, okay, that's harmful. I can't let my puppy eat chocolate. It's not that you're being selfish, and it's not that you're being selfish either, or angry at your pet. You're just trying to take care of them. So we're not talking about not functioning in the world in a way that makes sense, but what we're talking about is the motivation, where it's coming from, kind of decoupling that from these mental afflictions. So then the other two that come out of those are, and you can kind of see where one is building on the other. So you've got ignorance, then you have attachment, the self-cherishing, selfishness, aversion, and then, also known as anger. And then you've got pride, which is sort of, you can see where all of these things are connected, like, wanting to be important and wanting to be more important than someone else, thinking that you are, overinflating ourselves in our world, of course, because we're the center of our known universe. And then jealousy or envy. So those are the 5 different, what we say, the 5 poisons. And the other, they all come out of those 3. They're kind of variations on, coming from ignorance, and then the self-cherishing, and then the anger that comes out of that. So when we're working on our minds to change those, we have to see first, actually, before we can even do that, we have to see what are the effects of those things really on us, right? So, and that's an analytical kind of meditation. So I want someone else to talk and not just me, but I could come up with a million examples, but so we say out of the 3, the first one, probably the easiest to work on, believe it or not, is anger. And even though some people feel like, no, I'm really prone to anger, it's actually, of the 3 main ones, it's the easiest one to work on, because we can disassemble it. We can show that it doesn't function. It doesn't serve us. It ultimately doesn't serve anyone else. The ill will that comes out of it. So then if you get into like more talking about, 10, 10 perfections and negative things like having ill will, where do those things come from? It's easy to start to debunk the training that we have, that sort of knee-jerk reaction to be angry. So I am going to stop and let somebody chime in on that. Let's take anger. Anybody, can you see where that isn't helpful? Is that easy to see where it's not helpful?
I come from a family of very angry people. And so I've been, I don't know, looking at it for decades, really. And I didn't particularly use it as the basis for meditation, which is really what you're talking about. But I found, I sort of connected a few dots. And the reason I talk so slowly, sorry, I'm like an idiot. I'm a village idiot.
It's good.
Is because I try to draw in other things. So one thing is that there seem to be lots and lots and lots of dots, and you can join different dots or unjoin different dots. This is getting a little abstract. One particular dot that I found very interesting was fear. So I realized that I guess as a woman, particularly, you grow up with a sense of fear. At least I did, that some, because men or people or bigger people, adults, are going to hurt you in some way. And so the lashing out with anger was actually, I realized, it took me a long time to get this, was fear. So I think that's all I'm going to say. So I'm sorry, Bonnie, if I haven't connected it nicely as a source of analytical meditation, but perhaps it was in a way, just not in a formal way,
Yeah. Well, hearing you say that. So when something is working, then we would say, that's not mental affliction, right? But sometimes misunderstanding. So I want to be careful how I'm saying this, but so the anger came from fear. Now, can you sort of unpeel fear and see where it came from two things. So one is like a wisdom to protect, but then where it gets tight and where it stops working for us is where the fear is like a self-cherishing. And I think what's so challenging is there are so often things that are connected. So something positive and useful is connected to something that is not functional and not useful that we want to get rid of, right? So fear, there's a feeling that we have to have fear, but actually it's just the wisdom of wanting to protect, understanding that something needs protection and wanting to protect is positive. The sort of grasping at self, actually what happens is we lose the clarity of how to functionally and effectively protect, I would say. And noodle on this, because I'm just throwing it out there, but I think it's like when something is working, how you can tell that something is negative is, quite frankly, is it hurting you, right? So that anger is hurting. And I would say the fear is hurting. So then decoupling, where is the thing that is helpful? And really look, again, this is where meditation is just absolutely essential, because we're never going to have the opportunity to do that unless we're really looking. And already I can tell you've reflected on this. But then what is it in that fear that is positive and helpful? And what is it in that fear that is not? And then what is the mental affliction associated with that negative side? So, you know, I you can tell I'm older anyway, so it's not like I'm hiding my age. I remember, you know, hearing love and compassion, and then September 11th, 2001, all of this suffering, and that, you know, look, I don't have to go back that far, but that was when I was still a relatively new Buddhist. So I was even more than now struggling with some of this stuff. But I think you can take what we talked about last week, school shootings, things, so many like terrible things. And it seems, if we don't examine it, it seems like compassion hurts. But again, I would challenge, I would say this is where meditation can be so helpful for decoupling. So like the caring for those beings, the feeling their vulnerability, our own vulnerability, being present in the wish for their happiness and the wish that we could take away their suffering, fully experiencing that. I think it's a challenge as a Buddhist practitioner to decouple, where is the pain coming from? Because sometimes compassion feels like suffering. And for me, I would say, I looked and it was very subtle. I'll say that, super subtle. It was a kind of selfishness. It kind of goes back to, because the place where it started to hurt was when I started to think of it in terms of me. You know, the closer it got to this one, the more kind of pain I had. And it was like that selfishness or self-cherishing was really keeping me from being able to be really, truly compassionate, which is not robotic, but it is feeling love and compassion, which are two different states of mind. Really feeling those is not crippling. It's actually motivating and uplifting, regardless of the situation. So the more we can find the pain point, and then I would say, look at it. If something is truly, we would say, virtuous or wise or, you know, helpful, then it isn't going to have that edge. And it's really about unpeeling and finding where are those things tied together? Where is something negative keeping me from having this positive quality or positive state of mind? And I will stop because I think I said things that might be certainly worth discussion and up for challenge even. So, or further thought. So anybody want to? No, nobody wants to.
I can say something. I'm thinking of two different instances, one more relevant to what you were just saying, one when you were first asking us about anger. I had gone through I went through a traumatic event in April, and I got together with a friend yesterday, and I'm more at peace with whatever happened. But I was very angry, I was very anxious, I was very sad for a long time. And I was with a wonderful friend yesterday, and she said, "Did you find the lesson in that? What's the lesson?" And I was like, "I don't think I know yet." And so I'm trying to reflect and find, and I think that's where I'm getting is trying to find, like, decoupling it and finding where was this helpful. So I'm kind of still in that stage of reflection in terms of that event. And then when you were talking about anger as well, the first thing came to mind, I just very clearly in my mind remember the first time I really felt angry, like profound anger. As a teenager, my sister left a family event early to go get high with her friends and just came home blazed out of her mind. And I was so angry and disappointed and just told her she was a disgrace and all these things. And I was just so, and I think some of that, I guess, was self-cherishing, because I was like, these are, because for me, it was like, these are not my morals. I don't think this is okay. And I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but that's the moment that came to mind. I just remember feeling like that was the first time I was really angry. And then I would like experience anger more often after that, and being like, I feel like I used to not feel angry, generally.
But think about it. So, that there was also protection, looking out for her, right? And that's kind of getting back to where it's like, there's something you can have without the anger, but they're so closely linked in our normal, ordinary, unexamined mind. That we develop a habit towards that, but wanting to like look out for her well-being. So the meditation that we're going to do is really about transforming a negative experience into a positive. And sometimes it's really helpful to take something fresh, but often if you've got something in your life that like that, I think it's a perfect object of meditation. So looking at how you reacted, what you said and what you did, and then replaying it in your mind, and then getting back in touch with the feeling. So you're not in the feeling because it's past, it's a memory, but getting in touch with that. So I did those things. I said what I said. She did this, I did this. And here's what happened. Here was the fallout of it. How did I feel after I got angry? And I said or did what I said or did. How did she feel? Did it really help the situation? And then, pause and say, so how could I have wanted, to be protective of her? And you could make a case for, like, I think even looking at, being a good example, wanting her to be a good example to the rest of the family, or there's so many like positive things that may have been motivating you're wanting to not have her do that. So then thinking, what could I have done differently? How could I have expressed all those positive things? Decoupled from that negative stuff. And I think what we're talking about also though is, how do I decouple the feelings? How do I decouple the tight anger, right? Right.
Yeah.
I always go, when I talk about mental afflictions, I want to make a squeezy fist because that's what it feels like, constricting, right? The meditations that we're doing are all about opening, open heart, open. How can you be open and let her know they were disappointed, like, right? An opportunity for intimacy, an opportunity to be, vulnerable and close. And then I have to say, at the end of the day, it doesn't always look like so we do the meditation and you imagine, what could I have done differently? How might it have turned out differently? But the one thing that is how it could have turned out for you internally differently. Now, we want an external outcome too, right? But we can't control that.
Right.
But you're planting seeds for something different. So in the moment, we can't get too hung up on whether or not, because the negative things are never going to give us what we want either. And that's the part that really kind of requires also analysis.
Right.
I say these things are negative. It's an assertion. Buddhist teachings say, don't take my word for it. Like, examine, is anger ever really good? And I think right out of the gate, we can say, yes, it helps me to protect. It helps me to set boundaries. So I think we have to go further and say, well, is it possible to be protective and set boundaries without the anger? And then what does that look like? And then how does that feel? And how would that affect me and the other beings that I'm interacting with? So that's when we talk about transforming negative things into positive, it is seeing the lesson for sure. But sometimes the lesson just in itself is like understanding something about our own state of mind that could only come through this negative thing, right? What appears to be negative. But then, and I started to touch on this last week, if it's functioning to help you, then was it really negative? This touches a little into, we say, the emptiness of phenomena. Like, we think something is good or bad, black or white, but are they? We have to kind of examine. And Lama Yeshe would always say, check up, not just the first thought we have. So, yeah, I guess maybe we could, did you want to say something, Paula? Okay. So since I just sort of essentially described what this next meditation is, maybe it would be helpful to try one. And then I'll say, honestly, picking the heaviest object isn't necessarily a good way to start. Sometimes starting with something easy. So what was suggested for this meditation is think about your day today. And was there, a time that you were angry or irritated or some difficult situation? And then, how did you respond internally and externally, right? Because sometimes we're cool as cucumbers on the outside, but we're like raging thunder on the inside, right? So when we're examining, how did I respond? We have to say, well, we've got an inside view also. So how did I respond, and how did that go? And then how could I have responded differently that would have been more aligned with, more helpful, more aligned with the person that I want to be, and hopefully more productive. So that's the meditation. And then when you have that hopefully aha moment of what I could have done or how I could do this differently, then feeling some kind of resolve to really try to do that in the future, to move in that direction in the future. And so if you want to use the example with your sister, we talked about it, so you can try it, or you can just try something easier, or just be more timely, something from today. But let's take a minute. Now, bring to mind a difficult situation. Remember it from start to finish. Maybe you were irritated or angry. Maybe you were impatient. Maybe you were afraid. Think about how you reacted in the situation. Did you feel peaceful or happy? Did your response make you feel at ease? How did it affect others around you? If it's negative thoughts, how did it make you feel? Try to imagine another way of dealing with the situation. A way that reflects who you want to be, a way that is open, peaceful. What would that look like? Now imagine the situation all over again. And just imagine responding, reacting in the way you would want. in a way that is open, productive, and happy. Imagine what it is like to be free of that anger or fear or impatience. Imagine how liberating that would feel to you. Imagine the effect on everyone around you. And think how wonderful it would be to never have that mental affliction again, to be able to maintain your clarity, and make a resolution in yourself to try to respond in this way, creating new habits. And just imagine if you could totally free yourself from that negative habit, how liberated you would feel, and how much you could help others. And be an example. And then just imagine that they could also be totally liberated from that negative emotion. How wonderful that would be. And then just dedicate the process, the practice that we've just done towards those very things, towards freeing ourselves from the negative emotions that trap us, becoming examples for others, people who can help others. And dedicate towards the happiness of yourself and all other beings. And then just sit for a minute with the feeling of being someone who has this aspiration in your heart. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back into the shared space. So, yeah, it always feels like something shifts, at least for me, after a meditation like that. And it's a little bit challenging when it's a smaller group because I don't want to put people on the spot, but I also want to be inclusive. So if you guys want to unmute and either say something or not, but was that helpful at all? Did I talk too much? Not enough? How's it going?
I thought it was just right, Bonnie. I really appreciated it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think what my goal was in thinking of how to change those behaviors in the future is something I'm working on, but it was good to like sit with it and imagine how differently things could be or how other people could be affected when practicing those things, not just telling myself this is how I want to behave.
Yeah.
I did have some trouble with distractive thoughts again, but I think it was because again, this was my first time practicing this particular meditation. I don't think it was for any other reason, but it was also interesting because I was linking the event I was thinking of to then further events when you were saying like, how could it affect others? And it was like, oh, well, I may have behaved that way in a different instance, and how could it have affected them in that instance? And so,
Yeah.
similar behaviors for myself, right? And how that could have been different.
Yeah. I want to be careful because all of this is kind of deep stuff. Like we're looking at our mind and kind of looking in the nooks and crannies that aren't examined necessarily unless we're doing a meditation class. So, one of the things that's so important, and I think I said it before, is being gentle with ourselves as we do this. So when I say like, oh, self-cherishing mind or selfishness, there can be a thing that there, and I think a protective thing that comes up of that, like, well, wait, right? So sometimes it can feel like irritation at hearing that, like I'm not a selfish person, but if you look, that too has a real positive, could have a real positive side. Like I need to be gentle with myself, right? I'm wise enough to know I can't be judging myself too harshly. That's a wisdom. But at the same time, like challenging ourselves to, it's not that we're bad people, it's just that we're suffering. And so looking at this is like, is it true that I could be suffering less if I make these changes in my mind? And if that's true for me, then it would be true for others. And ultimately that's what we can really do to help each other, to help, we would say, all beings. Any points of debate? I mean, healthy debate is also good. I'm sort of debating myself. I'm trying to figure out what could you think that you're not saying that, this didn't work for me. Not to say that I would have the answers, but I find a lot of times the analytical meditations can sometimes be like an inner debate. Like, okay, do I really believe that? Where is it not true? What, and really, really grapple with unpeeling the onion, so like I threw out things. I'm like, oh, okay, fear is related to self-cherishing. Like, is that true or not? Please don't take my word for it, right? But examine it. And the thing I'm saying to examine is the point that we are unhappy, the point that is suffering for us. That's the place where there's something to find. Something that isn't working for us is there. And if we can figure out what that is, we can start to unravel that by doing practices like we just did. So we're at time-ish. Again, I'm like, you could take yourself off mute and talk. I feel like I did a lot of talking tonight.
I think it was pretty even. Come on.
I'm
We-
also very
then-
much learning and new to all this, so I'm trying to learn more and not talk too much.
Well, I just want it to be experiential and want to be, certainly I think to be challenged. I think one of the benefits, my first Buddhist teachings were with these very high lamas, and certainly we just listened, but then in our own minds we grapple with it, with our friends. I think the benefit of kind of having, a normal, ordinary person teaching is hopefully you feel much more free to like question and it, quite frankly, it's really helpful to me as well. So I just want to make sure everybody is comfortable and moving forward, and that the class is helpful ultimately.
I mean, I've been in this for quite a long time, well, maybe as long as you, and so I don't have doubts. And when you say, is it linked to self-cherishing, and look at that, I already absorbed that really, really clearly. So I'm at the point where I stay at the subtle. I take myself to that subtle point whenever I can. Most of the time, I just want to kill people, and that's just normal. Yeah, but I know how not to do that, and I know also it's illegal, and so you know what I'm saying. So Daniela, I'm saying this for people who are new to this, and it takes decades to absorb the ground rules of the Buddha Dharma, doesn't it, Bonnie? And to get these things a little bit more absorbed, and then it, and you're good to go.
Well, I just want to, because it's a 101 class, right? And so you never know where people are. And I think, the proof is in the behavior, right? So, early on, I got pretty good with my external behavior, but still you can have like this very monkey mind. And I'll just share really quickly, just a personal example. There was a period in my life where I was really, truly giving it my all, like really stretching myself spiritually, emotionally, really trying to offer a lot of service, and things were not going my way. What does that mean? Well, it means, I'm trying to do something helpful, and like people are not appreciating it. Things aren't going my way, just generally. And I had myself a little pity party, right? Because I've been fighting the like, well, I know this is coming from me and blah, 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 fighting. And all of a sudden I was like, and it's so weird because it felt decadent. It felt like I was treating myself to self-absorption. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, just feeling terrible and letting myself feel terrible, like settling in to the misery in some weird way. It was like some weird comfort. And I knew, even as I did it, like this is suffering. This is buying into it. This is not what I want to be doing. This is being selfish. But also I had a very real, like, I don't feel selfish. I've just been giving. And then I was like, oh, lamas, give me a sign, give me some kind of message. Like I'm really struggling here. And I turn on the radio because I'm weird like that. I'm looking for a message. I turn on the radio and it's this song, You're So Vain. You probably think this song is about you. And it just brought me out of it. And it just really like, oh, of course. And I'm suffering because I'm being so selfish. I'm, again, it doesn't mean not to have boundaries or not to protect yourself. And it doesn't mean that you never, might have to, like, people have repercussions and you might have to be the deliverer of them sometimes, right? That's so not have nothing to do with compassion or wisdom or any of those things. So it was, that was many years into my Buddhist practice. And even then, but the good news is then I caught myself like, oh yeah, if I'm miserable, I'm focused on me. And I got to figure out, we all have to figure out how do we take care of ourselves in a truly healthy way. In a truly healthy way. That's the struggle. Anyway, I thank you. I thank this lineage. I thank the center for putting together the class. I hope it's been a little bit helpful. And I appreciate all of you. Both of you, all of you, all two of you. I appreciate so very much. It's good to be here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm not able to come next week because I have a work dinner, just so you're aware. So it's not because I didn't get anything or I don't want you to feel any sort of way. I will be out of the house.
No worries. And if I did feel bent out of shape, that would be truly my problem, my ego, my selfishness, right? Like, this is an opportunity for me. So thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful night.
You too.
And have a wonderful week next week. And I hope to see you after that, Daniela.